So much on my mind, keep it all in line, juggling tasks that fall from the sky. Oh, what a scene, somewhere on this road, there is a load that's lighter for me. Show me the road that's lighter for me.
Welcome to episode 10 of the parenting TV series Chaos to Calm. In this series, we look at those all too familiar family chaos moments and see how we can transform them to calm. I'm your host, Noelle Kirshner. I'm a minister and writer who has published in places like the Huffington Post, the Today Show Parenting Team, Mamapedia, I Believe, and Crosswalk.com. I'm also a mother of 3 boys. In fact, the last time I shot an episode, I was pregnant. Today, I wanted to share with you a few chaos and calm shots of my own as a mom of a new baby. My first calm shot is of my son's first trip to the pool. His older brothers never let me put them in that hat. The second shot is of my son dressed up as a pumpkin for Halloween. I have pictures of each of my 3 boys in this costume when they were babies, which makes it so special. Perhaps you have special traditions like that too. My chaos shot is of my son's first bite of solid food. Let's just say he was not a fan of bananas. What is particularly appealing to me on the show is exploring how faith can inform those everyday decisions that we make as parents. Faith can help us make wiser choices that can bring true fulfillment. Today's topic is no exception. We will be honing in on the risks worth taking, especially as they relate to women in midlife. Recently, I wrote a series entitled How to Live Your Life Purpose that ran on my blog. The topic of risk especially resonated. Maybe you feel empty because you are so busy with family responsibilities that you have little time for you. Dreams involving your other passions have long been drowned out, and you're not sure how to re-engage them. Or maybe you have been working towards your dreams or interests for years and feel bored. What you are doing is no longer igniting something inside of you. Whether you are afraid to take a leap or unsure of what it would look like, or both, I have 2 guests today who can help. My first guest is a broadcasting dynamo, beautiful person inside and out, and lucky for me, a friend. Kerry Barrett is an Emmy award-winning TV news anchor, reporter, and broadcaster. Formerly affiliated with Today in New York, Kerry has also appeared on the Weather Channel, NBC, ABC, and Fox TV stations in markets across the country. She currently serves as the founder and CEO of Kerry Barrett Consulting. It's a full-service media training and public speaking boutique that's geared to bringing out her clients' inner rock star. She's also a mom of 3 children. Welcome, Kerry.
Thank you so much for having me. And can I say, when you have a 6-month at home, I know you're not sleeping much. You look fabulous.
Thank you
I
so
know
much.
your home life is chaotic.
Up last night.
But we're going to bring it together today.
That's right. For the sake of ourselves and women who are
our
watching.
best.
That's
Yes.
right.
Thank you.
When we were first perusing the idea of having a show together, which I was so excited about, you told me, Noelle, I really want to talk about risk.
Yeah.
And by the way, I'm terrified of public speaking.
True
And I
story.
thought, oh my goodness, you are
Yeah.
someone who've clearly risen in the ranks of broadcasting, and yet you have this fear. Can you tell our readers and our listeners a little bit more about that?
About my fear, yeah, well, it goes back decades at this point. It started, I would say, when I was in probably 5th or 6th grade, and it was triggered by a bullying situation. But at that point, I became terrified to go up in front of a crowd and kind of put myself out there. I think a lot of people are familiar with that. It was crippling, though. It was something I battled for decades, and it's interesting. I started college as a pre-veterinary medicine major. I did that for 2 years. Chemistry and I did not get along. so I took some time off and I wanted to figure out what the heck it was that I was going to do. And in that 1.5 year time period, I still didn't really get it all together. And I thought, you know what? I'm going to enroll in the communications course at my school. And surely in that broad major, that broad field of study, I will find something that I can use to make a living. And oh, by the way, maybe it will help me overcome this fear that I have of public speaking. I was going to try and kill two birds with one stone. I got an internship at a local TV station in Greenville, South Carolina, mostly because I got 3 credits for it and it wasn't sitting in a classroom, and I loved it. So at that point, I knew that if this was going to be what I did, I needed to figure out how to get over my fear of speaking not only on camera, but face-to-face in a large group setting as well. Yeah.
It makes sense. I remember, you know, Jerry Seinfeld.
Yes.
He did this funny sketch where he said that people are actually more afraid of public speaking than they are of dying.
Yep.
And so, as a matter of fact, if you're going to a funeral, people would rather be in the casket than giving the eulogy. in
true.
Typical Seinfeld style. So I'm wondering, what enabled you to get over that hump? How did you surmount your fears?
You know what, and I think I've taken this approach in many areas of life, not necessarily articulated this way, but when I wanted to make something happen, failure it was not an option, period. And so I had to put myself out there, and this is where it gets really uncomfortable, no matter what you're trying to do. If you're in an area that is unfamiliar to you, or that you're afraid of, or you don't really know what the end result will look like, it's taking the action, putting yourself out there, and just slogging through until you figure it out. And that is really the only way that I've ever overcome anything that I've been afraid of, is just forcing myself to do it, no matter how uncomfortable and terrifying it was. I may go home and sob in the corner in my bedroom for 2 hours afterward in the fetal position, but nonetheless, I put myself out there and I made myself do it, and each time I learned a little bit more. And I think that's the key, really, in almost anything that we try and do, is just do it. Don't let yourself be paralyzed by analyzing how everything could go wrong, and if you make a wrong turn here or you make a bad choice there, all of those mistakes that we make, they all teach us which way we need to go instead.
The power of persistence. I'm hearing you say that. And also, failure can be a great teaching tool.
Absolutely.
It's not necessarily something that we need to be afraid of. I saw you speak one time, and I found it so insightful when you said, you know, when you're confronting a fear, you can't go over it, you can't go under it, you have to go right through it. The only way to make yourself a better public speaker is to just push through. And I think that that is so true.
Yeah, I think one of the things, especially about public speaking, is that it's one of those things you can't intellectualize your way into. You can't read your way into being a better speaker. It's something that you have to do. Like with many things, you know, give me a book about how to be a pilot. I'll read it from, you know, beginning to end. Don't put me in a cockpit expecting to fly a plane without any experience. You have to do it in order to learn.
That's right, and that's a loaded metaphor because your husband is a pilot,
right?
Yes, so you speak with experience. So what are you up to now? Like, what caused you to leave your very successful career in broadcasting to embark on something new?
You know, it was a number of things. Really, it came down to, it was just time to go. It's a business that has grown increasingly unstable. It's an industry in a state of contraction. It's a wonderful industry, and there are amazing, dynamic personalities and a lot of diversity, and I really, truly did enjoy everybody that I worked with at every station that I've worked with across the country. However, waking up at 1:30 in the morning, that was a bit of a bear. And it was just time for me to make that jump and see what it was that was out there. So I left NBC, and I'm poking around and trying to figure out what jobs are out there that my skills may be transferable, and I've never done anything but TV. And I met with a woman who did PR and communications for a big law firm in New York City, and she said, you know what, you're crazy to go back and try and find a corporate job. You have a skill that is hard to come by, and people will pay you well for it. And I'm like, you're right. So I went home and I told my husband, I'm like, I'm going to start my own business. And he's all, are you kidding me? You don't know anything about business. I don't, but I will learn it. That was 6 months ago, and I'm still learning, but I love it. I am invigorated in a way that I haven't been in probably more than a decade in TV news. So I have to learn as I go along, and that's what I'm doing.
So you were able to overcome the hurdle itself, and now you're in making other people able to do the same thing, right? You're empowering other people. So it's not just women, it's men.
Yeah.
Are your clients, are they businesses? Are they individual people? How would you describe the people whom you're working with?
You know, it varies right now, and I think one of the reasons is that because my business is so new, it's only 6 months old at this point, I'm still figuring out exactly what my target audience is and what my clients will look like 6 months from now and a year from now, and I'm sure that'll morph. What I have found that was unexpected unexpected is that a lot of people in finance have been contacting me about either prepping themselves for contributorships on, CNN or MSNBC or Fox Business, or people who are looking to release video content for their businesses but don't know how to go about it, want to make sure that they are putting their best self forward on camera. It's also people who are in a corporate setting, who maybe there is a group of managers or executives who need to hone their video presence or their public speaking skills. Even the stodgiest corporation now have YouTube channels and Vimeo channels and video on their website. And if they don't have it, it looks a little bit outdated. So people are kind of hopping on this video train, if you will, because if you're not on it, it's going to run you down eventually. So it's a broad range of clientele right now, and I imagine that it will morph and shift a little bit as I get further down the road. It's
one thing to communicate, it's another thing to communicate effectively, and that's what I'm hearing you're doing. That's what I'm hearing your work is. So for the woman in particular who's sitting at home watching this right now, can you give us a snapshot of some of your advice? Like, what would you say to her who is potentially afraid of public speaking, but who wants to start testing her wings?
Right. Well, it's a tough thing to do. The way that I started is probably not going to work for most people. Most people are not looking to jump into a broadcasting career and get daily experience in front of a live audience where you are absolutely forced to push your way through. What I would suggest is taking small bites, small steps. So perhaps that means speaking at a church breakfast or speaking at the PTA, or even if it's just kind of an extemporaneous impromptu speech where you raise your hand and you get up and make a point, force yourself to speak out in front of groups, and little by little, incrementally, you will find your confidence growing. Now, it's okay if you make a mistake. We all make mistakes. And in fact, you should expect to make mistakes. Don't expect to be perfect. People don't like perfect people anyway. So turn those little mistakes into a personality showcase is what I like to call it.
I love that.
You create a moment. Mistakes can be an endearing moment between you and your audience. So figure out how to make them work for you and then move on with the rest of your message. But biting off small chunks, even if it's just 30 seconds or a minute, I used to be terrified to do even that. Make sure that you do it. Go out and force yourself to do it, and then incrementally get longer and longer and longer. And by the way, one thing I used to do, and this sounds a little crazy, is when I was a Cub reporter and I was a newbie in the whole business of speaking publicly in front of people or on cameras, I used to go by myself. Would go into my room and I'd pick something unremarkable, this mug. And I would force myself to talk about it for 60 seconds, and then 90 seconds, and then 120 seconds. And I would just force myself to talk. Do I have really 2 minutes of information about this mug? Not really.
Well, let's try 30 seconds. You have me interested.
But it would force me to be able to talk about something and just talk, no matter how much I did or didn't know about it. But that was an exercise that I used every day just to get myself comfortable with speaking about things that I may not necessarily even know that much about.
Mm-hmm. I think that's wonderful. Presentation-wise, quickly,
yes.
I know when I started this show, you gave me some invaluable pointers. What would you say to someone who just wants to look somewhat put together or polished while they're making that leap?
Absolutely. So I would say a couple of things. Hands down, the biggest mistake I see people make when they're on camera is lack of energy. And one of the reasons is that the camera itself, the lens, just kind of flattens everything. It mutes everything. And so what feels over the top in person when you're watching it through the screen doesn't usually appear that way. I've very rarely seen someone look over the top through the screen. So make sure that your energy is up. Make sure that you greet your audience with a smile. It sounds really simple. A lot of people don't do it. Even if you're on a selfie video that you're going to be using to post to LinkedIn or Instagram or whatever it is, greet your audience with a smile. It's a very quick way to make that instant connection. But people get lost in the words that they're trying to remember that are coming out of their mouths. And so those things that make conversation natural kind of get pushed to the side. Remember to keep your authentic self. Don't whitewash yourself. Other than that, keeping things clean, polished, neat. You don't want to have a fussy hairstyle. You don't want to have bright, flashy jewelry that catches the light and distracts people. You want people to be focusing on your message,
yes.
not whatever crazy thing it is that you're wearing or you have on your face or whatever
I love that. So stay focused, have a smile. Wonderful tips. I feel like I could talk with you so much more. Thank you, Kerry, and good luck with all of your work.
Thank you for having me. It was nice to be here.
Kerry's story is one of inspiration and empowerment in the face of risk. My next guest specializes in empowerment as well. Kathleen Smith is the founder of MorphMom. She is a lawyer who realized how difficult it was to re-enter the workforce after staying home with her 3 children. Her passion is helping women reconnect with theirs, whether it's through a career, hobby, or volunteerism. MorphMom hosts individual and large-scale events, a weekly radio show, and a podcast called MorphMom Moments that have equipped and inspired thousands. Welcome, Kathleen.
Thank you so much for having me here, and I love what you're doing, inspiring everybody through this show and all of your work.
Thank you so much for saying that. I have wanted to have you, truth be told, on the show for years, and this show was perfect. Risk and empowerment absolutely connects to what you're doing. And I'm wondering, as you've interacted with thousands of women, what in particular are you seeing are the fears that are tripping them up and keeping them from taking that leap into the unknown?
Well, I mean, there's so many different ones, but there are a few that really do stand out. And I'd say the first one, which is probably an obvious one, is the fear of failure. You're terrified to put yourself out there in front of everyone. And once you say it and it's out there, it's really out there, and to not succeed is really, really scary. You know, many women have maybe stepped away for a while, have been raising families, have been sort of out of the spotlight, not focused on themselves at all. And then all of a sudden, to recenter the attention upon themselves and not make it is really scary. And ironically, on the other end of that, success is really scary. Because maybe you put yourself out there and you say, I'm ready and I'm going to do it. And all of a sudden, you're succeeding and you're doing a lot better than you may have realized you would have ever done. And you sort of may lose the flexibility. You may lose sort of your own time, and you may feel like you have overcommitted to something you weren't prepared for. So on 2 ends of the spectrum, I've seen that. And another one, I think, is the imposter syndrome, where you are terrified to say, I've written a book now, I'm a writer, but people don't believe that you are, and it's just a scary thing to put yourself out there as something and see the reaction of others. So those are probably 3 of the biggest fears that I've seen.
Well, I've had Jessica Leahy on the show before, who talked about the gift of failure and how failure is actually a powerful teacher. And at least as far as parenting goes, so many parents are trying to shield their children from failure, probably because we don't like to feel it ourselves. But as a matter of fact, sometimes it can point us to a new direction that's helpful. I'm wondering, you probably have some stories like that, of some misfires that have actually taken a woman to a place where maybe it was better than what she initially thought it would be. Can you think of an example like that?
Well, I think just in general, to just say generally, is if you don't fail, you haven't tried. So the benefit of the failure is to see, okay, I gave it a shot, that's the wrong direction. Now I know how to redirect. I know that this wasn't the right way to do it, and from learning from that, I'm ready to go a different way. I've learned, I personally have gone through that. I mean, I started this 8 years ago, and there have been bumps along the way that it's a little embarrassing to say, I gave it a shot, it didn't work, I've got to pick myself back up and go a different direction. And we've tried that. My first website, which we tried to do sort of all these fun, unique things with it, and it wasn't working. And I think the hardest part about that was to admit that it wasn't working, that I put myself out there and that it wasn't working, but then to redirect and figure out, okay, because it isn't working, what will? And how do I refocus and take what I've learned and redirect it? So over the 8 years, we've changed our focus many times because of that.
I love that. So the change has actually promoted the success. And it kind of resonates with that idea of persistence that Kerry was talking about, which is so important. This is going to succeed. I'm going to figure out how to make it succeed. And if I have to change along the way, that works too. So as you're encountering different women, and of course, all of them want to be successful, even though it might be a daunting term, right? What particular things have you noticed in their stories? What makes a change, particularly at midlife, something that's appealing, but also kind of daunting?
Well, I think the first step is this midlife decision to start refocusing on yourself. And I think that in of itself is an enormous change. Because when is the last time you really thought about you? You're always worried about your children or your family or your partner or your whatever else you're doing. Very little time is spent focusing on what you want to do. Where do you want to be? What do you want to do next? So I think that in and of itself is one of the biggest, most daunting changes. And once you accept that, now what do you do with it? And it's scary, but I think what's appealing about it, once you get over the fear of the failure and accept, I might fail, I might not, I might look silly with what I'm trying to do. But what could be very appealing about it is how brave it is and how courageous it is to accept that it's okay to focus on yourself for a while and take a chance. So I think the daunting is the fear of failure, and sometimes the appealing is that you were able to overcome the failure and learn the benefit of having tried it and given it a shot.
And something that I love about MorphMom is that you're not taking that leap alone. I mean, your organization is looking to come alongside a woman. What kinds of supports have you found that have been particularly impactful for women who are wanting to make that leap? Certainly, I'd love to hear more about what you're up to, but also what other avenues of support have you seen that have been helpful to women making that transition?
Well, I think one of the most important lessons, and I learned this early on, and it's a tough lesson to learn, it's not always your friends. Your best friends are not necessarily the best support system in this endeavor. They are in many other ways, but I think you have to go into it understanding your friends may not understand what you're doing, may not be at the same place, and therefore may not give the amount of support you might need at that time. So I think that's the first step. Don't let that worry you or scare you, because there's so many other ways. There's so many other women out there, and men and everybody, who wants you to succeed and give it a shot. Like MorphMom, we'd love for you to come with us. But go talk, if you find something you're interested in, go talk to people who are doing it then. They will be an enormous support for you. They want you to succeed. Talk to everybody on the sidelines, on the fields, wherever you are. Talk about your idea. Talk to people. You will find support where you never thought it existed. And it's one of the most exciting things, I think, that when you realize that people want you to succeed, they want this to happen, a stranger's words could get you through the next 10 years, and you'll never expect where it came from. So I think talking really to everybody around you, but not expecting that it's always going to be positive, but throwing it out there to see what you can get in return.
I like the idea of that one conversation that can surprise you and support you. As a pastor, I see so many times, that's a trace of God. That person, they don't know it, but they just impacted, they touched something deep inside of me, and that's going to propel me forward. So sometimes I think we can be vehicles of support and encouragement to each other, but we can also allow ourselves to open up to the idea that God could work through us in supporting and bringing another person up into who God made them to be. I love that idea. So when we were talking about this episode, you shared with me one of your favorite stories about what you do that encapsulated so many points. Particularly as a mom, I loved it, and I was hoping that you would share it with us today.
Oh, I'd love to. And this particular MorphMom happened to be my very first interview that I'd ever done. And by the way, when I was talking about fear and how scary it is to start, I'm from New Jersey, and I flew to California to start because I was really scared about putting myself out there in this imposter syndrome. So I've lived all of this. I flew across the country to start this. So in case it didn't work, I wasn't completely exposed. So I reached out to a friend I hadn't spoken to in 30 years, and I said, can I tell your story? And I want this story to help others figure out what their next step is. And I never realized what I was getting into before we sat down and started talking. So I had always adored this woman, Lizanne Sarter, and she lives out in California. She's actually an identical twin, and her twin is doing amazing things in California as well.
Amazing.
And she had a child who had autism. And at the time, she worked in television, but was also struggling with the school system to support her child. And in California, she was having a difficult time maintaining the support that the child needed in class. So she argued with the school, fought with the school. She was getting nowhere. And finally, she said, you know what, I'm going to document this and show the school system just how much he needs their help. So she did just that. It was a hard thing, leaving work. And, she said, even financially, taking that risk, another huge risk financially to devote yourself to something. But she said it was for her child, and she had to do it. So she did a documentary of her child and what he needed, and showed the school board, or showed whoever it was. And immediately they said, well, of course he needs help. And she said, well, that's what I've been telling you for all of this time. He needs help. And she said she kind of stepped back after that and said, now how do I go back into what I was doing when not just my child, but children need help, family needs help, need help, need to get the word out. You need to get the support out. So she created something called the 6-letter word, autism, 6 letters. And she made a film, and Rumor Willis heard about it and acted in the film. And it was all about, not true to life, but parts of it, how a child needs help in the system and what do you do. And she just started this whole community and support system through the 6-letter word, helping others with autism. And I just thought so many facets of that story were exactly why I want to share these stories. You know, she found a need, she took a risk, she succeeded in what she did, and she helped others with it through that story everywhere. So it's one of my favorites because it was my first, and I was so scared and thought, what am I doing? And I sat down that day thinking, what have I gotten myself into? And I left in tears thinking, this is exactly why I got myself into this. So that's one of my favorite stories. And they're all my favorite, by the way. But that's just a memorable one to share.
Yes, I love, again, as a mother, seeing not only how she was fulfilled, she's inspiring other women to be fulfilled, but she's also making a difference for her son and then giving a voice to so many other children. It's incredible the skills that maybe we have that are latent or that maybe we've honed but we can use in another way. And that process of being unleashed and to really expand, you know, our reach and the ability that we have to impact people, it's truly inspiring. So I'm so grateful for all that you are doing to help women, and I know that we're going to share your information so that they can tune in. Is there anything that you're particularly wanting to, to pass along that you're excited about that MorphMom is up to?
Well, first of all, we're so excited that you would even include us in something like this because I think what you're doing is so inspiring, and your story, you are a MorphMom as well. What you've evolved into, and with this amazing what you're doing today, I love this, and thank you for letting us be a part of it.
Absolutely.
So really what we do, we share stories, similar to what you're doing here as well. Our conference, I think by the time this airs may be over, but we'll be doing a conference in Maplewood, New Jersey on Monday, November 11th. We have an online subscription club. Every month we're doing events, and we have the radio show, and we just try to get the stories out to help others figure out what their next step may be through the power of learning from those who've taken that next step.
Well, thank you so much, Kathleen. I'm so appreciative for your wisdom and experience and for inspiring us. Thanks for being on the show today.
Thank you so much. And I want to say that Kerry's story was the perfect MorphMom story as well, and it was an honor to be here to listen to it.
Thank you. Kathleen's expertise helps us identify what's at stake when making a leap and how to make it. Both Kerry and Kathleen's work demonstrate the power of connection as we embark on our passions. We are not alone as we yearn, question, and hunger for this work, especially at this stage in our lives. In addition to one another, we have spiritual resources at our fingertips to empower us. God has a plan for our lives, and embodying that plan in its entirety will usher in our greatest joy and fulfillment. Risk is woven throughout the stories of many characters in the Bible. We can learn from these stories and memorize key scripture verses to equip us when we feel afraid. Some of those scripture verses can be found in my blog series, How to Live Your Life Purpose, on my website. For this series, I break the journey of living your life purpose into 6 steps: longing, surrender, an inventory of strengths, risk, persistence, and joy. The series' goal is to foster the necessary faith-filled discernment to embody our God-given passions and enlist God's help for success. Further, if you're interested in exploring where faith meets everyday midlife issues, I recommend Lisa Jo Baker's recent book, The Middle Matters. She writes, "The middle is the place where we might have outgrown the shape of our teenage genes, but have finally grown in to the shape of our souls." Her first subject is the muffin top. Thank you to Central Presbyterian Church, where I serve as parish associate, and to HTTV for making this episode possible. Also, thank you again to Kerry and Kathleen for appearing on the show today. If you want to contact them, their information will follow. Finally, please like and share this episode on social media if you found it helpful, and stay tuned for others. Until next time, may calm be with you.